The storm rolled over Red Mesa like a restless spirit, dragging shadows across the open plains and the weathered town of Dusk Hollow. The wind carried the scent of wet earth, pine, and something electric, as if the heavens themselves were watching. Most townsfolk had taken shelter, slamming shutters and barring doors. But one woman stepped out into the rain as though it belonged to her. Her name was Evelyn Hart, a 30-year-old widow who had come to Dusk Hollow 2 summers ago, carrying nothing but a faded satchel and a silence that made men whisper. She owned a small white cottage at the edge of town, near the river that cut through Apache land, a place where no settler dared wander after sunset. Tonight, though, she stood barefoot in the mud, her white dress clinging to her skin, spinning slowly beneath the pouring rain. Her hair, a copper tangle, caught flashes of lightning as she moved. There was no music, only the sound of water striking tin roofs and the mournful whistle of wind. Yet somehow, she danced as if she heard something no one else could. From the high ridge overlooking Dusk Hollow, a shadow watched her. He had no name that white men could pronounce easily, but his people called him Talon of the Storm. He was Apache, tall, muscular, and scarred by both war and betrayal. His tribe had once camped along the river below, but the soldiers had driven them away after a broken treaty. Now Talon returned only to watch, to remember, to make sure his people's spirits were not forgotten. He did not understand why his eyes followed the woman that night. Perhaps it was the madness of thunder or the strange light that clung to her as she turned beneath the storm. But something inside him, something that had long turned to stone, stirred. She did not dance for anyone. She danced for herself. And that, in Talon's heart, felt sacred. When lightning flashed again, their eyes met for the first time, across the rain, across the distance of 2 worlds. Evelyn froze mid-spin. The figure on the ridge was a silhouette, motionless, but his gaze struck through the dark like fire on steel. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw the faint glint of turquoise beads at his neck. Then the storm deepened, and he was gone. Evelyn pressed her hand to her chest. "Who are you?" she whispered, though she knew the wind would carry no answer. The next morning, the rain had washed the world clean. Mud glistened under a pale sun, and mist rose over the fields. Evelyn found herself walking toward the ridge as if pulled by invisible strings. Her neighbors warned her often, "Don't go near the river." The Apache spirits still haunt those lands. But she didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in eyes that could see through storms. At the ridge, she found something strange, a small carved feather made of bone and painted with red clay. It was smooth, warm to the touch despite the morning chill. She held it close, feeling a pulse of energy, not frightening, but protective. That night, she placed the carving on her windowsill and lit a single candle beside it. Outside, the sky was clear, yet she felt watched again, not by danger, but by destiny. Miles away, Talon stood in the dark woods, his stallion shifting beneath him. He had left the feather there on purpose, a silent offering. His grandmother once told him that spirits guide hearts through symbols. He didn't know if she would understand or even if she would find it. But somehow he needed her to. As the night deepened, he looked toward the faint light glowing in her cottage window. He whispered to the wind in his native tongue, words of respect, of calling, of curiosity. And though Evelyn couldn't hear his voice, she felt something stir again in her heart, like a rhythm returning after a long silence. For the first time in years, she smiled to herself before sleeping. But deep in the hills, others had seen Talon's return. And in Dusk Hollow, not everyone believed love could cross a border drawn in blood. The morning sun broke through a thin mist that hung over Dusk Hollow like a half-remembered dream. The storm had passed, but its breath still lingered in the air, heavy, damp, and expectant. Evelyn Hart walked along the path that led to the river's edge, her boots sinking lightly into the soft earth. In her palm, she carried the small carved feather she'd found near the ridge. She couldn't explain why it mattered to her. It wasn't just a trinket, it felt like a message. Someone had left it there deliberately. When she reached the riverbank, she stood for a long time, letting the quiet fill her ears. The world felt untouched here, untouched and watched. Then she saw him. Across the river, partly hidden among the pines, stood the same man from the storm. His long black hair shimmered in the morning light, droplets still clinging to it. He was bare-chested, his skin bronzed and marked by the sun. His body wrapped only in leather trousers and tribal adornments that caught the faint light, turquoise beads, bone pieces, and a single eagle feather tied to his braid. For a moment, Evelyn forgot to breathe. He didn't move closer. Neither did she. They simply watched each other, two strangers bound by something unnamed. "Did you leave this?" She finally called across the water, holding up the carved feather. Her voice was soft, but it carried in the stillness. The man nodded once. His movements were deliberate, graceful, almost regal. Then he spoke, his voice low, deep and calm. "Yes, it belongs to you now." Evelyn frowned slightly, taken aback by the certainty in his tone. "Why?" He hesitated before answering. "Because you danced when the sky was crying. You did not fear it. You honored it." She blinked, unsure if she understood. "You were watching?" "I was," he admitted. "The rain is sacred to my people. We dance to it when it comes. But you danced alone. Without song, without fear. It is rare to see such a thing among your kind." Evelyn's lips parted, caught between embarrassment and curiosity. "I wasn't thinking. I just needed to feel alive again." Talon of the Storm tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he saw through her words. "The sky saw your heart." It answered. A shiver ran through her, not of fear, but recognition. There was something in his presence that unsettled and steadied her all at once. She had seen many men since her husband died, merchants, ranchers, drifters, but none spoke like this. None looked at her as if she were more than a face in a crowd. Before she could speak again, the sound of distant hoofbeats broke the spell. Evelyn turned toward town. Two riders were approaching, both wearing brown dusters and sheriff's badges that glinted in the sunlight. The Apache warrior's eyes sharpened. Without another word, he stepped back into the shadows of the forest. "Wait!" Evelyn called, taking a step forward, but he was already gone, like smoke dissolving in the morning wind. The riders reached her within moments. Sheriff Clyde Morton dismounted, his gray mustache twitching with suspicion. "You all right, Miss Hart? Folks said you were headed this way alone." "I'm fine, Sheriff," she replied evenly. Morton's deputy, a younger man named Seth, squinted toward the trees. "You sure?" "Thought I saw movement in the pines. Looked like an Apache." Evelyn's pulse quickened, but she forced her expression to remain calm. "Probably just a shadow. The woods play tricks after a storm." Morton grunted. "Well, you best be careful. Some of those Apaches don't take kindly to settlers wandering near their land. Times are tense again. Word is a few of their young warriors were seen near Red Mesa last week." "I'll remember that," she said softly. As they rode away, Evelyn turned back toward the river. The sunlight caught the water's surface, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw movement again, a flicker of dark hair, a glint of turquoise, watching from afar. That night, back in her cottage, she set the carved feather beside her bed. She told herself it was foolish, this fascination with a stranger, this impossible connection. Yet as she lay awake, listening to the crickets and the soft wind against her window, she could still feel the weight of his gaze, calm and unwavering. Miles away, in the thick of the forest, Talon sat by a fire, running his fingers over a second carved feather, its twin. He whispered something in Apache, a prayer of protection for the woman who danced beneath the storm. Neither knew that the line between their worlds had already begun to blur, and that soon. The rain that united them would also test them. The days that followed were calm on the surface, yet every moment felt thick with something unspoken. Evelyn Hart found herself glancing toward the ridgeline whenever she stepped outside, half expecting to see him again. Talon of the Storm. The name echoed in her mind like a forgotten prayer. She hadn't told anyone about their meeting, not even the preacher's wife who brought her fresh bread every Sunday, or Mr. Lyle who ran the store and always lingered too long in conversation. Dusk Hollow was a town built on whispers, and Evelyn had no desire to feed them. Still, each night she lit a candle by her window and placed the carved feather beside it, as though it were a bridge between her world and his. One afternoon, while tending to her small garden, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she froze. Talon stood a few yards away, silent as shadow. His long black hair framed a face carved by the wind, his bare chest marked with faint scars and painted symbols of red and white. Around his neck hung turquoise and bone, the color of sky and earth entwined. Evelyn's breath caught. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "If the sheriff finds you—" "I walk where the spirits allow," Talon said, his voice low but calm. He took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I needed to see you." "The feather? Did you keep it?" She nodded and reached for her pocket, revealing the small bone carving. "It's by my window every night." He smiled faintly, a rare, quiet curve of his lips that softened his fierce features. "Then you are under its watch." Evelyn looked at him closely. "Why does it feel like you've been watching over me even before that night?" Talon tilted his head. "Because I have. The land remembers souls who carry grief. You walk as if you have buried more than one life." She swallowed hard, staring down at her hands. "My husband died 3 years ago. I came here to start over. But sometimes I think the wind brought my sorrow with me." "The wind never brings sorrow," Talon said. "It only carries truth." For a long moment they stood in silence, the air heavy with the scent of sage and the distant rumble of thunder. Then a voice shattered it. "Evelyn!" She turned sharply. Sheriff Clyde Morton and his deputy were riding down the trail toward her garden, their horses kicking up dust. Evelyn's heart raced. She turned back. Talon was already gone, vanishing into the tree line like smoke. When the sheriff reached her, his eyes scanned the edge of the woods. "You see anyone out here, Miss Hart?" "No," she lied quickly. "Just me in the garden." Morton frowned. "Tracks say otherwise. Someone's been walking near your fence, barefoot by the looks of it. You be careful. Apache scouts have been sighted not far from town again. And if you see one, you best tell me first thing." "I'll remember that," she murmured. After they left, Evelyn's hands trembled. She looked toward the woods and whispered, "Why do you keep coming back?" That night, her answer came in a different form. A soft knock echoed against her back door after midnight. She froze, holding her breath. The candle flickered. Then came a whisper, faint but clear, her name. She opened the door. There he stood, soaked from a sudden downpour, his long hair dripping, his chest gleaming beneath streaks of rain. "You shouldn't have lied to protect me," he said quietly. "They will grow suspicious." "They already are," she replied, voice trembling. "But I don't care." "Why are you here, Talon?" He stepped closer until she could see the rain beating on his skin, the depth in his dark eyes. "Because there are men in your town who plot against my people. They plan to ride toward Red Mesa in 2 nights to burn what's left of our sacred ground. You must tell no one, not even the sheriff." Evelyn's heart pounded. "You're warning me? Why?" "Because I saw your spirit dance with the rain," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "And I will not let your soul be stained by their fire." Outside, thunder cracked again, sharp, violent, close. Evelyn looked up at the storm gathering over the mesa and felt the same trembling awe she had the night she first saw him. Talon turned to leave, but paused at her door. "When the rain comes again," he said softly, "follow it to the canyon. There you will know why I came." And before she could speak, he disappeared into the storm once more. Evelyn stood frozen, the candle flickering behind her. The rain began to fall, slow, deliberate drops that struck the earth like the start of something holy. The next morning broke heavy and gray. Clouds rolled low over Dusk Hollow, and a strange tension hung in the air, like the land itself knew something was coming. Evelyn Hart hadn't slept. Talon's words echoed through her mind again and again. They planned to ride toward Red Mesa in 2 nights. Red Mesa, the land that shimmered crimson under sunset, sacred to the Apache. The soldiers had claimed it belonged to the government now, but Evelyn knew better. It had belonged to someone long before ink ever touched a treaty. She paced the small kitchen of her cottage, torn between fear and resolve. If she warned the sheriff, she would betray Talon's trust, but if she said nothing, men might die. Her hands trembled as she poured her coffee, watching the dark liquid ripple. A knock at her front door startled her. "Miss Hart?" Sheriff Clyde Morton's familiar voice. She forced calm into her tone. "Come in, Sheriff." Morton stepped inside, dusting off his hat. "Hope I'm not disturbing you too early, ma'am. We're organizing a small patrol tonight. Word is, some Apache scouts were seen near the ridge again. Just making sure everyone's staying cautious." Evelyn's chest tightened. "Do you think there'll be trouble?" "Hard to say." The sheriff sighed, but tension's thick as molasses. Sometimes all it takes is one frightened man to start a war. He studied her face closely. "You'd tell me if you saw anything unusual, wouldn't you?" Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, Sheriff." When he left, she stood by the window, staring toward the canyon beyond the fields. The same canyon Talon had told her to follow when the rain came again by afternoon. She packed a small satchel, water, bread, and the carved feather. She told herself she only wanted to see if his warning was true. But in her heart, she knew she was going because she couldn't bear not to see him again. The wind picked up as she rode out on her mar, the horizon bleeding gold and crimson. The land stretched silent before her, wild and endless. She followed the river, where cottonwoods bent low over the water. When the first drops of rain began to fall, she felt her pulse quicken, and then she saw him. Talon of the storm stood beneath. A rocky arch of Red Mesa, waiting as if he had known she would come. His long black hair whipped in the wind, and his bronze skin gleamed beneath the gathering rain. He looked like part of the earth itself, immovable, ancient, alive. Evelyn dismounted, her heart pounding. "You knew I'd come," she said. He nodded once. "The rain always brings truth." "I need to understand," she said. "Who are these men planning the raid?" He glanced toward the horizon. "Not all who wear a badge seek justice. Some seek gold." Her eyes widened. "Gold?" "Beneath." "Red Mesa," he said quietly. "There are veins of it, not much, but enough to make men forget their honor. They say it belongs to the government, but the earth does not belong to paper. My people buried the spirits of our ancestors there. Now those same men wish to dig with shovels and greed." Evelyn's voice trembled. "And the sheriff, does he know?" Talon's jaw tightened. "He is not blind, but he turns his gaze when the wind blows in his favor. He was once a friend to our people, not anymore." A flash of lightning cut through the clouds, followed by a growl of thunder. Evelyn looked at him, rain soaking through her dress, wind whipping her hair. Then why warn me, Talon? Why trust me at all? He stepped closer, his voice low and fierce. Because you danced when the world wept. Because you are not like them. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the storm around them ceased to exist. He reached out, brushing his fingers lightly over the carved feathers she wore on a string around her neck. When they come, he said softly, you must not be here. Go back before nightfall. I won't leave you to fight alone, she said, her voice breaking. You'll be outnumbered. A faint smile ghosted his lips. You forget I am the storm. Thunder rolled again, and rain poured harder, soaking them both. The smell of wet earth and smoke drifted in the wind, faint but sharp. Evelyn's eyes widened. That smell, Talon turned sharply toward the horizon. In the distance, smoke rose from the trees. They came early, he said grimly. The riders from Dusk Hollow. Evelyn's heart clenched. Then I'm staying. He looked at her, torn between anger and awe. You would stand between two worlds that are not yours? I already do, she whispered. Lightning struck the mesa, illuminating them both, the widow and the warrior, standing side by side as the rain fell harder. And for the first time, Talon reached for her hand. The storm raged through the night, tearing across the mesa like a living beast. Rain lashed against the earth, lightning split the sky, and the wind carried the scent of smoke and gunpowder. Evelyn Hart stood beside Talon of the Storm, her soaked dress clinging to her frame, her eyes fixed on the horizon where flames began to crawl through the tree line. They're coming closer, she said, her voice trembling. Talon's gaze hardened. Then we meet them here. Evelyn shook her head. There must be another way. I can talk to Sheriff Morton. He cut her off sharply. You think words can stop greed? He already made his choice. She stepped closer, desperate. Then let me go. I can stall them, make them listen. His jaw tightened. Rain poured down his face, running through the markings on his chest. If you go, they will use you. And when they do, you will die for a lie. Evelyn met his gaze, unflinching. Maybe I'd rather die trying to stop them than watch another massacre. For a long moment, Talon said nothing. The thunder rolled around them, and between flashes of lightning, their faces were illuminated, hers full of defiance, his full of something he couldn't name. Finally, he spoke, voice low. Then we go together. They rode through the storm, Evelyn on her mare, Talon on his black stallion. The path to Dusk Hollow was slick and treacherous, the rain turning the dirt road into a river of mud. Lightning struck the ridge behind them, casting fleeting shadows of the two riders racing against fate. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, the rain had thinned into a mist. The glow of lanterns flickered through the fog, and voices echoed, angry, urgent, afraid. Evelyn recognized them. Townsfolk, deputies, drifters with rifles in hand. Stay here, she whispered, dismounting. Talon caught her wrist. You will walk into a den of wolves. Then let them see the storm they started, she said softly, pulling free. She stepped into the street, mud splashing under her boots. The men turned, startled by her sudden appearance. Evelyn? Sheriff Morton's voice boomed through the haze. What in hell are you doing out here? You have to stop this, she pleaded. The Apache aren't attacking. They're protecting their sacred ground, the land you plan to burn. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some looked uncertain. Others laughed bitterly. Morton's eyes narrowed. You don't know what you're talking about. That land belongs to the government now. No, Evelyn said fiercely. It belongs to those who bled for it. Morton's face twisted with anger. You've been talking to one of them, haven't you? Silence fell. Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes betrayed the truth. The sheriff drew his revolver slowly. You're helping him. You're helping the savage. At that instant, A dark shape moved from the fog, Talon of the storm, stepping into the lamplight. His long black hair clung to his shoulders, his bare chest glistening with rain. He wore no weapon drawn, but his presence alone made the men flinch. "You call me savage," Talon said calmly. "Yet it is your fire that burns the innocent." Guns were raised. "Hold your fire." Morton barked, though his hand trembled. The two stood facing each other, the lawman and the warrior, the old world and the new. Evelyn moved between them, her voice breaking. "Enough, no more blood. Not for gold. Not for pride." Lightning flashed again, and in that moment a rifle cracked from somewhere behind the crowd. The shot rang through the storm. Evelyn gasped and stumbled. Talon caught her before she fell, his strong arms wrapping around her as she clutched her side. "Evelyn!" he shouted, his voice breaking with fury and fear. Morton spun around, yelling, "Who fired that shot?" But chaos erupted, more gunfire, shouts, the smell of smoke returning to the air. Talon lifted Evelyn in his arms and retreated into the shadows, bullets whizzing past. The rain poured again, drenching them both. When he reached the canyon edge, he laid her down gently on the wet ground. Her skin was pale, but her eyes were still fierce. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered. She smiled weakly. "You said." "The rain brings truth." Her hand found his. "Now I know mine." He pressed his forehead to hers, closing his eyes against the pain tearing through his chest. Around them, the storm raged, not against them, but for them. And far below, Red Mesa burned. The dawn rose blood-red over the desert, painting the sky like a wound that refused to close. The war had come, not just to the land, but to the hearts of all who lived upon it. Smoke rose from the distant ridge, and the wind carried the sharp tang of gunpowder and betrayal. Talon of the storm stood atop the ridge, his body marked with ash and war paint, muscles glistening in the orange light. His long black hair whipped around his face as he gripped his spear, looking down upon the white tents of soldiers below. The men who came to destroy his people and take her. Below the ridge, tied to a soldier's horse, Evelyn Hart was being dragged through the dust. Her white dress was torn, her copper hair tangled, but her spirit still burned in her eyes. "Talon!" she screamed, her voice breaking through the wind. Talon's heart clenched, not with fear, but with fury. He had lived through battles, storms, and the deaths of brothers. But nothing tore him apart like seeing her in chains. He didn't wait for the others. He didn't even think. With a roar that echoed through the canyon, he leapt from the ridge, a storm made flesh. Arrows hissed through the air. Bullets cracked like thunder. But Talon moved like the wind, fierce, unstoppable, ancient. A soldier fell. Then another. Horses screamed and reared as his spear flashed in the firelight. Evelyn struggled against her bonds, shouting his name again, tears streaking through the dirt on her face. He reached her. His knife sliced through the rope with one swift motion. She fell into his arms, trembling, her breath shallow. "You came," she whispered. "Always," he said, his voice rough as thunder. But before they could run, the sound of hooves thundered from the south, reinforcements. Dozens of riders, armed and ruthless. Evelyn looked to him, fear glimmering in her blue-gray eyes. "There's too many, Talon." He turned to her, brushing her cheek with his hand. "Then we ride through fire." He lifted her onto his horse, a great black stallion named Stormwind, and mounted behind her. With one hand on the reins and the other holding her close, Talon kicked the horse forward. The canyon lit up with muzzle flashes and flames as soldiers fired wildly. The sound of bullets whizzed past them like angry spirits. Dust and sparks filled the air. Evelyn clung to him, her hair whipping into his face as the horse charged through the chaos. Behind them, the Apache warriors surged down the hill, shouting their war cries. The battle raged like a tempest. But Talon's eyes were fixed on one thing, the far ridge where the desert opened into freedom. A bullet tore through his shoulder. He grunted, but didn't slow. Evelyn turned, her face pale with horror. "You're hit." "Not enough to stop," he growled, blood staining his skin. They burst through the final ring of soldiers, fire blazing around them as a wagon of powder exploded. The shockwave knocked them sideways, and Evelyn screamed as the horse stumbled. Talon wrapped his arms around her and pulled her free just before the stallion collapsed. They rolled across the ground, dust and embers flying. For a moment, all was silent but for the crackle of fire and the distant cries of war. Evelyn pushed herself up, coughing. "Talon." He rose slowly, his chest heaving, blood running down his arm. "Go to the river," he said. "Follow it north. My people will find you. I won't leave you," she cried, clutching his arm. He looked into her eyes, that soft storm of sorrow and love, and smiled faintly. "You are my rain, Evelyn. Even if I die in fire, I will find you in the rain." Then he turned back toward the ridge, gripping his spear. Evelyn watched, tears streaming down her face. As he ran toward the flames and the soldiers who closed in, a lone figure against a burning dawn. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Talon of the storm." And through the smoke, she swore she saw him turn once, his eyes fierce, his face illuminated by the fire, before vanishing into the chaos like a spirit born of wind and lightning. The desert echoed with his cry, carried far beyond the battle, a sound that would live in her soul forever. The storm came without warning. By dusk, the desert was drowning. Thunder rolled across the red mesas as black clouds tore open the sky. Rain poured over the land, the first in months, turning dust into mud, washing away the tracks of war. At the edge of the river, where reeds bent under the weight of water, Evelyn Hart sat alone, her torn white dress clinging to her body. Her copper hair was soaked, plastered against her face. She stared into the raging current, her eyes hollow yet burning with hope. "Talon," she whispered, her voice lost to the wind. It had been 3 days since the battle at Red Mesa. She had run as he told her, north, toward the river. Behind her, the sound of gunfire and screams had faded into silence. The Apache scouts had found her hours later, guiding her to safety. But of Talon, there had been no sign. The tribe said he fell. They said they saw his body among the flames. But Evelyn refused to believe it. She remembered his words, "Even if I die in fire, I will find you in the rain." And now the rain had come. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the cliffs. Evelyn rose to her feet, trembling. She walked to the river's edge, the water swirling angrily at her boots. "If you can hear me," she said softly, "I kept my promise. I came to the river." A crack of thunder split the heavens, and for a heartbeat, she saw something move, a dark shape on the far bank. She froze. Her heart pounded. Through the veil of rain, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, broad, and drenched. His long black hair clung to his shoulders, his skin streaked with ash and blood. Around his neck hung turquoise and bone jewelry, cracked but still gleaming. His chest rose and fell heavily. "Talon," she whispered, disbelief trembling in her voice. He staggered toward her, every step heavy but certain. "You waited," he said, voice low and hoarse from smoke and pain. She ran to him. The river surged between them, cold and violent, but neither stopped. When they met in the middle, the current nearly swept them away. She clung to him, her hands gripping his back, feeling the scars and the strength beneath her fingers. "I thought I lost you," she sobbed. "You can't lose the storm," he whispered against her ear. His body shook with exhaustion, yet he held her tighter, his breath warm against her wet skin. They stood there, waist deep in the flood, as the sky poured down around them. For a long time, neither spoke. The world had burned, their people scattered, but in that moment, it was only them. When the rain softened, they climbed to the riverbank. Evelyn helped him sit beneath a willow tree, its branches dripping like silver threads. She tore a piece of her dress and wrapped a wound on his shoulder. "You should rest," she said, voice trembling. "You're hurt." He smiled faintly. "Not as much as I thought I'd be. Seeing you alive." She looked down, tears mixing with rain. "The town won't let me stay. They'll never forgive me for loving you." "Then don't go back," he said quietly. "Come where the rain begins. My people will take you as one of their own." Evelyn hesitated. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried above the canyon. "You mean, stay?" "Yes," he said. "Stay and build what the fire couldn't burn." She looked into his eyes, dark, endless, alive. Then she smiled, the first true smile in days. "Then take me home, Talon." He rose slowly, wincing, and extended his hand. She took it. Together, they walked along the riverbank, the rain softening to a mist. Behind them, the desert shimmered under the fading storm, washed clean of blood and sorrow. When they reached the ridge, Evelyn turned one last time toward the world she was leaving, the burning towns, the lies, the chains. Then she looked ahead to where Talon's people waited among the hills, fires glowing like stars. As they disappeared into the horizon, the rain fell gently once more, not as a storm, but as a promise kept. And those who lived by the river would tell the story for generations of the woman who danced in the rain and the Apache warrior who came from fire to find her. They would say that when thunder rolled over Red Mesa, you could still hear their laughter in the wind, and when the rain fell hardest, love returned with it.